Now we'll look at some more advanced features for tables and graphics. For this lecture, you can download these two PNG files, page and paper, attached to the lecture. And in your Lecture 18 folder, create a folder called Graphics and store your files that you downloaded in that folder. The Lecture 18.tex file is also available for download following the instructions in Lecture 4. I recommend you create it yourself though by following this tutorial. So I started with my template file and saved it as Lecture 18.tex. Now we'll create a title, more on tables and graphics for our new document. And we're going to use several packages. The first package that we're going to use is for tables, and it's called multi-row. And we'll add the packages that we need for graphics when we get to that section. So we'll start by saying here we'll look at more table and graphics formatting. And in the first subsection, we'll have more on tables. So I'm going to create a table and call it tab wrapping. This will be a table that uses some text wrapping in cells to get things to line up. And we'll use text wrapping in the last column. Now I have a macro, and you might have something with your editor as well, that allows you to automatically insert the environment. So I have a macro to insert a tabular environment. So look through the menu commands on your editor and see if you can find a macro or a template or something to insert the default text for a table, and that'll save you some typing. So this first table, we'll give it a caption. Of course, you can just type all of this yourself if you can't find a macro. And it's using the same table format that we've been using. And here I want to left justify the first two columns. So I'm going to space out these bars because when I type the L, it looks just like the bars, so it's kind of hard to see. So we have vertical bar L, vertical bar L, vertical bar. So those are two columns that are left aligned. And let's do a third column, and we'll start by making it left aligned. So I'm typing an L first, and then a vertical bar. I'll start my table with a horizontal line. And we'll make this a table about some fictitious programming courses. So we'll say CS 101. We have three columns here, so we want two and signs in our line. This is a Java course, and we'll put a course description, and that is programming with Java. And we'll end that line. We'll call CS 201 languages, and that description, programming language principles. We'll end that line. And then CS 301, we'll make this a compilers class and call it principles of compiler design and implementation. A horizontal line at the bottom of our table. We end our tabular environment, we end our center environment. The label that we want to use is the same one we used up here, which is tab::wrapping. And then we end the table. So let's typeset this and see how it looks. I got the LaTeX warning that labels may have changed. Typeset again. And this is what my PDF document looks like. So you can see that the table fills the page. If I were to change my document now to a two-column format, So we'll go PROC for proceedings, typeset again, and now you can see that my table is falling off out of the column. So I need to make this table fit within the column. And to do that, on the last column, I'm going to use a special tag called P. So instead of the L, I'm going to replace the L for left align with a P. And then in curly braces, the width that I want that column to be. So I'll say 3 centimeters. Typeset that again, and you can see that the last column wrapped the text to fit within this column of the page. So the P tag will allow you to do text wrapping in a particular cell or a particular column, and you can use that in each of your columns as needed. And that'll help you keep things lined up and fitting, especially in a 2-page or 2-column environment. There are also cases where you want text to span multiple rows or multiple columns. So we'll create another table and call this one tab multi. And this uses row and column span. So we'll combine these both into one table. I'll use my macro again to create the table. First I want to change my caption, and we'll call it spanning rows and columns. Center, begin tabular, end tabular. Let's get my label in here so I don't forget to change that. Tab multi. And now within here I want to create a table that has multi-columns and multi-rows. So let's start by having our tabular environment have 3 columns. I'm going to space these out again because I'm going to use left align in the first column, and the L looks just like the bars, vertical bars. Have the second column centered, the third column centered with vertical lines around the columns. I'll start my table with a horizontal line. Now at the top of the page I want the first column to be blank, so I'm just going to put the and sign. And then I want this next bit of text to span the next 2 columns. So I'll use the multi-column command. In curly braces, the number of columns I want to span, so that's 2. How I want this lined up, centered. And finally, in curly braces again, the text that I want to span those columns, and I'll call it ranges. Now I end that line. In the next line, I also want to start with a blank column followed by X and Y. So these are going to be the ranges that I'm specifying. And then I'll put another horizontal line. Now I want text that spans multiple rows, and I want it to span 3 rows. So I'll use the multi-row command. I'm able to use this because I pulled in the package multi-row. I did not need a package for multi-column. Multi-row, and then in curly braces, the number of rows I want to span, 3. And then the width of the column, and I'm going to use a star to just say make it its natural width. And the text that I want in that to span those 3 rows. So that text will be hot. So this is the first column spanning 3 rows, and I have a 3-column document, so I need to put in the text for the next 2 columns. So and sign 7 and sign 9. I'm going to make these X and Y ranges with numbers. And on the next row, I already have something in the first column because of the multi-row statement above. So I just want to start that with and to create a blank column, and then I'll make up some numbers for the next 2 columns. And then I'll repeat that. So now this word hot should span 3 rows, and then the next 2 columns will have these 3 sets of numbers. Let's do that one more time. I'll copy and paste. And we'll call this set of ranges cold. And we'll make our cold ranges smaller numbers. So imagine this is laying out on a grid and you're searching for something, and the areas of the grid are either hot or cold. So you're playing the hot, cold, warmer game. I will end my table with a horizontal line. Now, of course, I have my end tabular in center, my label, and the end of the table. So let's typeset that and see how it looks. I see the question marks here, typeset again. And this is what my table looks like. Notice that this range ended up missing the bar on the right. So let's go back and fix that. And I can do that by putting the bar after the C, vertical bar after the C in my multi-column for ranges, typeset again. And now I see it's lined up. So I have hot and cold spanning 3 rows. Let's clarify that by putting a horizontal line between those 2 multi-row sets. There we go, that looks better. So now I can see these are my hot ranges, these are my cold ranges. So now I've created a table that has multiple row spanning and multiple column spanning. Now let's look some more at graphics. So we'll create a subsection here and call it More on Graphics. One thing I want to do, and I often do, is keep all of my graphics in a folder. So here I have both of my graphics in a subfolder so I can keep them separate from the rest of the TeX files. So I need to tell LaTeX where to find those graphics. So I'm going to use, of course, the GraphicX package to include my graphics. And then along with the GraphicX package, you have a command called GraphicsPath. The GraphicsPath command can be used to specify where your graphics live. So in parentheses, you want to put the path to your graphics. I'm sorry, in curly braces. And we'll also put this path inside of curly braces, which is similar to putting it in quotes. And my graphics path is in the same directory I'm in, but in a subdirectory called graphics. So I type the name of my subdirectory followed by the slash, and that tells LaTeX to look in the graphics directory for the graphics that I'm including. Another thing I want to do is show you how to have subgraphics. So sometimes you'll have a figure that has, for example, figure 1A and figure 1B. So they're subfigures within the figure environment. So to do that, I'm going to include 2 more packages. And when you include packages, you can include more than one package within the curly braces at the same time by separating them by commas. So I'm going to create one Use Package tab, and I'm going to pull in 2 packages, caption and subcaption. And we'll scroll back down to our More on Graphics. And now I want to create a figure with subfigures. So I'm going to type, both of my graphics are in the graphics folder. So that's one thing we did different. For the subfigures that I'm going to create, I'll have my first subfigure. I want to call it Fig Paper. And my second subfigure, I will call Fig Page. And both of these will be in an encompassing figure, which I will call Fig Subs. So now I can reference, you see I can reference the figure itself and the subfigures, and you'll see how we put the separate labels in and break this out. So I'm going to use another macro here. I also have one for figures. I'll use the figure macro to type some of this text for me. My main figure is going to have the label Fig Subs, as I put up here. So that's the main figure. We'll make the caption for the main figure We'll call it the process. Now we've been using begin center and end center in our environments. Another thing that you can do is simply use the centering tag, and this will center everything within this environment. So within my figure environment. So if I just use the centering tag, then I don't have to say begin center, end center. So it saves me a little bit of typing. So within this figure, I want to create two subfigures. So I'll start with my first subfigure by saying begin subfigure. I want my figures to align at the bottom so that they're both aligned at the bottom. So if one figure is taller than the other, they both line up at the bottom of a line. And then I want to specify a width for my figure. So we'll look at now a different way to specify a width. There's a special tag called text width. That is the width of the text on your page. Since this is a two-column format, and I'm going to have two subfigures side by side, I'm going to use 0.2 of the full text width for each subfigure. So I'm putting 0.2 before the text width tag. And this is nice because if I change the margins on my paper, change the text width of the entire paper, I don't have to come back and change anything here where I would have to if I had explicitly stated how many centimeters or inches I wanted to use for this subfigure. I'm going to use indentation so I can clearly see where a subfigure begins and ends. And I also want my subfigure centered, so I'll use centering tag again. And then I want to include my graphics. The graphics that I've shared with you are a little larger than we want. We've looked at how to change the width. Another option for graphics is the scale, and this basically just scales the graphic down. And so if I say scale 0.5, that's going to take the graphic and make it half of its original size. Then in curly braces, the name of our graphic. The first graphic we'll put is paper.ping. And I want this graphic to have its own caption. So the main figure has a caption, but we want the subfigures to each have captions as well. And we'll call this caption the beginning. So we'll say beginning. And then of course we want our subfigures to also have their own labels so we can refer to them separate from the main figure. And here I've called the first subfigure Fig Paper. So I'm putting my label here, Fig Paper, for this subfigure. Now I'm done with this subfigure. So I'll say end subfigure. And then after this, I want to put a % sign. So this is used in a different sense than we normally use it for comments. And this is saying that the next subfigure should be kept with this subfigure, and this will make the subfigures side by side. Now I want to include my second subfigure. So I'm going to copy this entire subfigure environment and paste it below. And then make the changes that I need to make for my second subfigure. So I still wanted aligned bottom 0.2 text width, centered, scale 0.5. Here instead of paper, I'm going to use my other graphic page. And I'll call this figure caption end. And then I need to change my label to Fig Page. All right, so if I did this correctly, I should be able to typeset the document. And of course, I see my LaTeX warning labels may have changed. Run it again. Confirm that there's no warnings. And let's see what those subfigures look like. So first, the text. Both of my graphics are in the graphics folder for the subfigures, figure 1A and figure 1B. So my subfigures were given the lowercase letters in sequence. And on the next column, I see my figure. So figure 1, the process. A, beginning. We started with some notes scratched on a piece of paper. B, the end, our nice typeset document. So in conclusion, now I know more about tables and graphics. And of course, as I've mentioned throughout the course, there's always more to learn. So hopefully these tricks will help you advance your LaTeX skills and make even nicer formatted documents. And I do hope you continue learning more on your own beyond this course.